Good morning, Gen Rinpoche, Tashi Delay. And good morning, Katrina.
Good morning.
Welcome to everyone online to this last class in our series of teachings on the Rice Seedling Sutra, hopefully to be continued in the future. We'll begin with some preliminary prayers. The link is in the chat box. To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one that's gone, the foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide to beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With your body's form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, land, sun, and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratnam. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in
Yeah, ta Dixon again.
Oh yeah, this one. Oh yeah, ta got it on. Oh, the Chinju, Causation Bushole, Chinjule. Then the Tawani June, Taka Keku Machena, Dile Luba Shemet, and Dile Momba Shemet. The Dread Tawani Jones, Tawaja and Jorbachu, some millionaire Junes and Gudwa. And the Tagatari cook up some Budelia, Kewala come, Tegwapa, Kewachima Penjachi, Susutanda, Troop to watch Chawades and Gudwa. The Dread Tawani Jone, Taka Keku Machenas. Dile Luba Shemet and Dile Momba Shemet, a rangi ran Luba is. And the Ran Kuba Shivichi Momba Kuba, Tendici Jura is and Gora. A Karisnako, Tandangazo, Tawajet and Jorbachusa and Milutoba de Kavlia, Nikiwa Chima Penja Tanda Karitum de Tuya Yorwa, Sosu Matu Mado. Tenju de Niba Shindoka, Kibutan Rutoba Chovala Sigiba. Yazako Kibutanda, Sendita Mayimba Kiwachima Tanda, Mondulami Koba, Mele Tarva the Tamjakimbe Koba, a Karitumna, Tuya Tapsi, Rangachetu Yores Ugudwa. Oh, Tandide Kugabte, Tanzin General, Tatu Sone, Namju, Yawayeda Tendula Soba Kyawa Membachale, Milu Tomnaya, Milu Mabuto Naya, Sanjay Tambatan Jawa Tendra Kumbura. Oh, Tataran de Shindo, Kugab Sambo Tobate, Yabuchi Pechu Church, Sendi Chibu Tunda Soba Maiba, Kawachima Penji, Tunda Trubu de Sungua. Imagina, ne Dile Momba, Kuba, Roa, Rangira Luba, Tenik Momba, or Tende, La Jokiri Sungua, ya.
So here, as the great Bodhisattva Shantideva has said, at this time where we have this life of freedoms and endowments, of leisures and opportunities, we have the ability then to achieve whatever kind of goal for the future that we might want. So at this time where we have this kind of life, if we fail to make use of this, if we fail to use it for something good, what could be more deceptive than this, or what could be sort of stupider than this? So at this time, we have this kind of life of freedoms and opportunities, meaning that we have the ability to work not just for the affairs of this life, but could achieve something for beyond this life, meaning a rebirth as a human or a god, or strive for liberation. We have the ability to make effort at virtue and avoid non-virtue. So if instead of using our life for that purpose, if we just sort of let it go to waste, what could be a greater deception to ourselves, or sort of what could be stupider than this? So again, there's another verse from Shantideva where he says that this life of leisure and opportunity is extremely difficult to find. If I fail to turn this to my profit, to use it in this kind of beneficial way, then how could such an opportunity be mine again? How will I get such a chance? So again, this kind of life that we have right now, we have the ability, if we make effort, to achieve a rebirth as a human or a god, or even to strive for liberation and the state of omniscience. And so out of sort of grasping at a self, we have this kind of delusion. We usually follow after that. So even if we have, say, achieving a human life is extremely rare, but to have this kind of human life where we have also met with the teachings of the Buddha, that is even more rare. And so we shouldn't let this sort of pass away or go to waste, but instead we should not just think about this life and sustaining ourselves, but go beyond that. If we don't make this profitable, we don't use this kind of life for those opportunities, then how will we have such a chance again in the future?
Oh yeah. Tadandako, Churchubala Tashi, Tunji Sama Zombarwa, and Sanjay, Chutan Jawa, oh, Dindre Kugab Sambutela Sungura, Tanju Melindi, Toya Hajan Gombo Yensen Dole Sungudwa, Sanjay and Dokapso. Pena Sungda, Zambulindi, Tai Kamzu Chamboli Jurs, Zambuli Yonzo de Tai Kamzu Chambuchel Jur, Ani chui lab di kasakal pa, chui lab ki pa, jab se kyansu la lakwa jab ni chui lab mabu yora, chui lab mabu jab. Ani pecha yorda. Zabule yonzo kyansu chenpo chido, kyuru chui lab ki pa kang. Te wo liya, kyamzu ting liya, rube, kutsu ting la de dengich. Dendri ne mang chawa de tai kyamzu yinso doa. Bindu ko tsu wol de, lo jaa jaa to liya. Ani tsu na liya, go to zi chibi ware. Ya shuka liya ten chen go to zi chibi ware. O ti che ti pe shen da chi liya, shing ina da ta chik, shing chenpo ra chi che. Ti ki de ikan yuwa che. Ki de ikan yuwa che. Ya shing ini leble che. Tinde shing chi, tsu kal pa, tsu pa lab che, tsu lab che, kas kal ki ki wade na. 다 리베데 로자네 양고 도스 집에 갑디다 그게 냐신 되게 이가 유스나 그런 거야 집에 시그레베스나 다 시바 잠지 이 레마도 다 용야 백하고래 되어라 오 대답을 신도 중가와 텔레자 야와게다 저거 주상에 밀 데페 신도 니가와 인송고도와 야 되질라나
So right now we have all of the kind of necessary conditions to be able to accomplish the Dharma, all of those sorts of conducive conditions. But having this kind of situation is extremely rare. As the Buddha himself has described in a sutra, he gives this example. And if we can sort of imagine this example of this entire world being a vast ocean, covered with an ocean, and this ocean is perturbed by all kinds of waves. The waves are moving around. And that ocean, at the bottom of the ocean, lives this turtle. And the turtle, he only comes to the surface every 100 years. And so we can imagine there's that turtle underneath the surface, and on the surface of this vast ocean is like a large piece of wood with a hole in the center. And so if you were to ask the question, well, is it possible for this turtle, when he comes up every 100 years, to put his head through that hole in that piece of wood that's going along on this vast ocean stirred about by waves? We would have to say, well, yes, that's possible, but it's extremely rare. It's almost so rare as to be impossible. And so thinking about it in this way, to have the kind of life that we do right now, where we have encountered the Dharma and so forth, is, like this example, extremely rare to have come across all of these conducive conditions.
Oh, yeah, give it to Toba Cubalas, Jite Chima Penji, Tanda Susutruna, Tuya Yore Songdoa. Pena kibu chungi tanda tubarishine kiwa chima lada mee koba nye son la maji bache lada mee koba che tube ten kebar chenchi toba che samne te ranga lagba yore songu wara o tene nye son la kechi ki yu kare lada mee le keye yu kare sana shan la tsebe meki wachu lunga yesu kwene meki wachu tipa ten docho ki kiwa chu chinde ki trup kiwa thoma meba na saa shebe tikba tuzule gyosim che shakba che o tende nyeri ta mesina samlu tangora ta tomba kelenge tende na de chisi soi pato che so che ge mesere kelenge ware ina nyeri na lam samlu sita tuna de yawara mesi china so tirinye me konlia lunga yesu ji kone shala chawa kar cho so ma sota ro pemba de kar che so chuda temba kar che so samlu re ta chigina Ti kiawa de shuk chambu yude, kiawa ngama sabe migiwa yu na tezu patanda mi madu bacha ne lada mili kia madu ngesung kiawa de kato gudwa. O ti yude zako, ti nyeri mesina samlu tangu gudwa, ti tuye duwa ngazu. Ta ti ngazu madu tuye yubirwa, o nyeri mesina samlu tangu tindi chana, kukone kondo ya pendu ya shirwa. O tini ti che liya kibun dringi, Tarwa tobe gyunde chine odi taamebe tongba nyeda shiragati sabu samlo taan tubu danda yakshirwa dimena ko nga samsa nga rang dochi shivuji yoba sambate tinde nga chi yoma re samsa sa mandale sosu janjan samlo taan shenda chiye samlo mako sosu tandale shenda karine chepeba odi yabure medoa samsa tinde samlo chi kortanda yabure te ordo 아니 작다 공주제다 신자 숙제부지야 나주다 건조서 딱서도 현존 미리다 줄로다 가서간에 촉심업지에도 대속까지이나 초르초르다나 타르바토베 교사가 여삼나 타르바토베 교르루도 코아콜지 교대 녀모레 되어라 디마 초르다기와라 텔레타데 남사 타르바토마토나 라게 티 타바토베 교사야도 디나시티 라치부 멤버 심제 탐지 대원들 동에 면도바 라다 치바레 삼 라케 군세 연대 군대 센데 판매 천배 심제 강가가 더트버 톱자 더트버 지치게 삼 개군세 연대 군대지 기부 단다 타르바토 얘기 좋았던 얘기 기빈도 대 깡통배게 랑도르기 내 참마 신경게 강사진 교라 자기에 삼 근데 삼르다나니 택바심베 산제지 고바톱지기 교래안도 도그라도 근데 삼르단 것도 와 대소다 근데 삼르다니 기부섬게 남제는 벌 삼르로 없었다 아니 다도 산제지 고바 근데 토바 자기에 삼 추세로나 스쿨은 남준에 삼르단 것도 개와 근데 삼르다나 간대치기나다 차차기나다 기부섬게 남기를 못해 또 스럽스 삼르다 애니 때는 주고네 개발럽 첨부사고요라 뭐야 티체는 샘버슈스 된데그래.
So here, as this verse says, that with this kind of life of freedoms and opportunities, we can accomplish the aims of beings. We have the capacity with this life that we have. So what will come in the future? Again, Dharma is about what is beyond just this life. And so here we have the ability to work for, say, achieving a good rebirth in the future, avoiding a rebirth in the lower realms. And this is based upon our abandoning any kind of harmful actions of body, speech, and mind, doing as much as we can to benefit others, as many positive actions, as well as working to confess and purify those kinds of negativities that we have accumulated in the past. And so here, this is important that we don't just sort of, we may have, say, taken a vow not to kill, but thinking about these things on a daily basis, looking at what have we done in terms of virtue and non-virtue today. We can increase our virtuous activities by really paying attention to what we are doing and reduce those kinds of non-virtues. But this means evaluating our actions and watching our mind on a daily basis. This is something that we are absolutely capable of doing, and we can improve our minds. This isn't beyond our capacity. And if we think even moving beyond just the contemplation for the being of small capacity to that of recognizing the kind of defect of this strong self-grasping and the kind of attachment to our side and aversion, animosity toward others. We have the sense that there's this autonomous kind of I. And when we begin to evaluate and examine that, we can see that these kinds of afflictions of attachment and animosity, thinking of the us and them, is something that is the source of our problems. And so we're not able to eliminate those instantly. We can't immediately achieve liberation, but we can create the kinds of conditions to reduce those, to be able to eliminate them. And over time, we can create the kind of causes that lead to liberation. But thinking beyond just our own situation, if we look at all of these other sentient beings who have acted like our mothers and fathers in this life, we can recognize that they are all just like us in not wanting to suffer and wanting to have happiness. And thinking that if we could achieve a state in which we have eliminated all faults and are endowed with all qualities, in which we are able to fulfill the aims of beings, we know all of the points of what are to be adopted and what is to be abandoned. Then we would really be able to lead those beings to their happiness, to their liberation. And so with that kind of thought, if we take the time to think about these various levels of motivation and really generate the kind of attitude, thinking that I want these virtues to go toward that goal of gaining the state of omniscience for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's really how we create the causes for that result. And so whatever virtuous activity we are doing, whether we're saying a prayer or doing prostrations or studying the various topics of the Lam Rim, it's very important to contemplate our intention, our motivation ahead of time. And so I would ask that you please set a good motivation for then listening to these teachings.
Oh yeah, that is. I'm going to do the Mao said the lesson. Oh yeah. Tadi tension debar joa Mao said to so tension debar joa is tension debar joa is solution with the capacity. So tension debar joa tonga de chu tongo se. Chu tonga de sanje tongo se tendi de ketchum shibiche songudoa. Oh, tendi Mao said. Chiruba to the net and Mao de Guiomare. Jude Chebabo Takbatin to so your resa. Zambuling Damada, Nuchi Damada, Tewatung, the Kyoan Damada to the Kanga, Takbaran Jungi, Chebabo Chick so your resa, some Gitoa, Tension de Barjo de Guiomare. Then it Tavanase, Tangjamba to the Chiso, says she shot Kuchisha, Takba Yense, tell it any Kanga to Bade, Chisigdo. The tension de Barjo de Guiomato. Kasha two takba, two the takbare, two one Koran to cure matter, Kushan, take all Mother Sarah. Oh, tente young Bimbatin, oh, to your mother, Koran Tawasha, Kigores. Temariri to the Songesu your mother, Sama number to the Songesu your mother, Koran Tawasha, de Yongores, Kuke your mother say. Tente sometimes to got tension de Barjo, your mother, Nambachana. Tension is to Yelengi Gu. The legislations Kunini Kubiora or all the Tiba to Chilamna. There's all the tension de Barjo, Mares. Yeah.
So here, picking up in the text, we were on 59 in the English, talking about the proponents of dependent arising. So here, whereas Buddhists, proponents of Buddhist tenets assert that all composite things are dependent arising, as we see here in the Rice Seedling Sutra, he says then, monks, he who sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. He who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha, and so forth. And so here, dependent arising is an extremely important tenet, something that is proposed by the Buddhists. And those who then are non-Buddhists, who assert some kind of a creator who is permanent and self-arisen. And this is contradictory to an idea of dependent arising. So those that would assert some kind of creator who is self-arisen and permanent, or those like the Samkhyas who assert a primary substance that is the basis of all phenomena, or there are some who assert like a permanent entity of time that is the cause of all things. They don't assert other types of causes. Or you have, for example, the Charvakas who are saying that things are produced causelessly, like peas are round, nobody made them round, they're just sort of spuriously that way. Or thorns, nobody made them sharp, they just are that way. So things arise causelessly according to them. So here, as opposed to that, proponents of dependent arising, including Buddhist proponents of dependent arising, would say that you need in particular two causes, a substantial cause as well as coordinating conditions in order to bring about an effect. And this is in contrast to any of those other views.
Oh yeah. Oh, didn't do that sort of. Tension Jabber Jonas, Novo Kudan Keleton, Kevatin, Kudan Kans to Kudity, Nielengi Kudilisura, Nielengi Jusan Koran Rea to Shora, one euro, and the Shinglish than a subbing part of it in Yelen Kuda. Lenji against Sada Chuda, Truda, or to Luda, to Kangade, Yene de Party, Nugungo Juel, Robert and get a Lenji against Gra. Kudan Kansigdoa. Or Kudan Kansa. Yelenda Lenji Chiganidoa. The thing needed Judipan Jura Cheche. Yelenda Lenji Chigin to Robert Chidoni, Teleco, and Juachin and Juarchin and Drebudia to Biora. Tension Dreber Juasete. Yelenda Lenji Chigan Tension, Tedan Dene Tiwang Kigiora. 마도 코란 수기요 말에 랑원에 주베 껴와르기요 말에 그냥 아주 대 싱도도 하고도 수 버르지 로마 강가파 매버 차기도 그 랑원에 로마 매버 그 차기요 말아 그 저다 지지 만디데 되는 거티 강가 로마즈 파 매버 차기요라 야 수징어 된데 저 수지 끼우고도 그런 랑원에 당하게를 해서 삼 수기에 그요 말아 그 계지가 교주다 주다 대주 강가 전지 상수는 그 수기에 온거도 랑원에 계계게 메도 라완치는 그 계계 지주주석해요 말에 교단 계지 지서도 코티 만주란주 랑신지 루버도 그 교르거라 쩨쩨용거라 현다수 쩨용거라 교단 계계 수쩨 말아 아마도 그런 랑신지 수통겨 말아 나라서 메카시 나기도 나소스도 소소 라완치는 게 나기요 말아 라완치 나게 수게요 말아 소분나기 차셔도 지만디 강가지 차셔 방법이라 대서 지만디도 때 대부매도 소화 대부매도 다 나게시거라 강가 나게도 세거라 다 자스나 맨더세 걸리걸리 들으셔야지 현다도도 교단계도 선부체 대 교진도 다다래서나 당가 자소세 대부도 세기도 교진된데 소관을 때네 나와다 자바데 수고도 아마도 지 송게 나게 지금 라와가 추나 라와게 가서 자도게지 맨도와 롭스 삼르타네시 땡진 레버리 중앙이나 라원에 주베 동바레 땅고 강가다 그래 나라종가 삼저 소소 야부선 부치 때 삼기도와 치롱다 나로데 잘라망보여라 대저 강가 짜다치 드렌 대저 강가 내가 저거라 우당구도 추통구도 칼라사구도 시보지 내가 지대서 강가지 소되네야 초하루 제대되도 땅을 선대여서 삼개월 선보리 되어라 나가라서 나라 라와게 지선대여 삼세 라와게 요 말아 띵아주 소하되도 약부 용도 로야레로와 남주네 샴 적반도 릴린다고 텐데나 자든 적어줘야 안자기라 근데 나와 전도다 빠르시가네 리저 치기도 당아디 니만나시레메도 하섬 그 속보다 대절에 뜨신데네 지고와데 하고도 소라 용구도 그래서 서서 라완전에 지치기 섬 되게매 우당에도 와진 지만디나 선부시 되게면도 어디에 땡진 레버리 좋아이네 라완도 주바요 말에세 땡제이네 동바레서 라완에 주바 동바세 저거라 야, 담아서 뒤질랍시네.
So here, if something is dependently originated, that means that it arises due to causes and conditions. Here, specifically, the substantial cause and the kind of coordinating conditions come together to bring about a result. So if we have like a tree, the substantial cause is the seed, the thing that has the potential to bring about that effect. But it needs also those kinds of coordinating conditions, water and fertilizer and ground and heat and so forth. And it is then through the transformation of that substantial cause that you have the establishment of the result. So it's not as though these things come about sort of self-arisen, not from their own side, somehow like autonomously. Like if we look at a tree again, when the leaves of a tree fall, it's not as though the tree like decided to drop its leaves or just does that from its own side. It's dependent upon all kinds of other conditions, it getting colder and the weather and the kind of things that are available to that tree. And so too, when it grows new leaves, it's not as though the tree sort of thinks from its own side without depending on anything else to produce leaves, but rather there are many causes and conditions necessary in order for that tree to then grow new leaves. And so here, these things are sort of shaped and created through the various causes and conditions. There's not that kind of autonomous existence from their own side, even though we might have the sense that there is. Like people get sick. None of us wants to get sick on our own. We're not like autonomously from our own side getting sick, but rather it is due to the various elements, the things within our body being out of balance. There's some kind of conditions that lead to that illness. And then so too, when it comes to healing, recovering from that illness, it's not as though there's the autonomy to decide, oh, I'm going to get better, but rather upon taking the proper medicine and doing the proper kind of care, one then becomes becomes well. We have the conditions to have our sort of health restored. And so when we think in this way a little bit, we can see that things don't have the kind of objective existence, autonomous existence that they appear to have. They are empty of that. So here, all of these things, like, when we think too that our being alive, for example, we sort of have this sense that, oh, I'm alive autonomously, like I have my own existence. But when you really begin to examine, look at all of the things that are necessary for us to be alive, all of the various kinds of conditions of our body. We have to be breathing, we have to get certain nutrients, we have to get certain things. And there are many causes and conditions that are necessary that have to come together for us to be alive and sustain ourselves. It's maybe a little bit easier to recognize this, say, when we get older and the conditions have changed. Maybe before we were able to move really fast, to go about in a way where we sort of felt like we had our autonomy. And as we get older, it may sort of be like we're about to fall down as we're walking, and we can see that there are so many things that we depend upon for our health and our life. Like, for example, if we don't breathe for a number of breaths, we're not alive anymore. We have this sense that, like, oh, my life, my sort of body is autonomous. It exists from its own side. But when we begin to do a little bit of analysis, we can see that that is absolutely not the case.
Oh, yeah. That tension driver was a good and tension driver to the Abbey Samlutana. Net on Bany said the Samluko, some seminal chart to Guara. Oh, this good again Latene, Chonko Reside. Good again, Mambo's talk Balatene. They want again debuted that they are to Kudoa. Oh, teacher. Then a tug bet and dress ago, attended to the need of shake door. Then a tug bet and said, the Koran all the pa, Penangazo Kansarva, Soso Kansarva, Kansa. So at the Dunyo Gangi Kansar de Ordo. Semi again. Can't do the teacher. Yeah. Oh, Karsor. Kansa in the Pumbungabo Karul at 10 attack with Kibusigdoa. Pumbungabo, Garantulo Pumbungayora, Sobuchi Yore, Semchi Yora. Namju Church and Takbar Shooting was set to shoot the Sobudua, Sobuchi Yore, Sugi Pumbusigra. And it, you know, we said to Shichide, simply to watch the Hakongeshtoga. Says it about you, Hakonget, so at the Dunyongachi, Sobudamenda, Sobudi to the Truare, Shiva did in the two to Kato the Yip that in the Kayomare. In a Sobolatan, Jacoyaki on Getche. Tension Deborah, Sobola Tene Takwasidoa, Pumbungala Tene Takwares. Pumbungabu Karun la Tene Takbekibu, Kansa, Kitcheni Sura, Namjucheni Bene, Kansa to the Tendential Segresura. Attending Nga said, Kansa de Karil Sigurasana, Soboche, Semche, Soroche, Dushiche, Soboche, Semchero, and let Namjune Toa Tawada Tunga Tanyum Chinyon de Gedi, Musa Tobuche Takwayon de Gatua. Oh, Yabudu, Yabumedu, Tichi, Soadi, Suchambuyara. Soya Tandalgan to Tarika, the Kanga Yungura. Jitemba, the Soya, the Tae, that to make came to Tandal and the Pazo, Makawa, and Makawa, the Sekanga Jaguara. So, and then Dushi say, O Titi Yabudu, Yabumedu, Parisha, the Kambari, Tichi, Samlo, Dushi, Towers, the Bashidua, Titi Samsa. Soya Pombu Dushi Pumbura, number Shibe Pombuche, and then Duchi Pumbuse. Duchi Pumbus de Semba, Kawada, Mikawada, Lumatangela, Chawal Pa, Juchung, Simjus to Watela, Semba Segora, Joseph Gogotan and Gogotangu, Cotella, Gogotangu, some Pensatagona, called Pentago, Yabuchi Chego, Samsa, Kawada, Miguel Chola, Semba Shibe, Sembatua, Semba Segura. Did any condom I get $3 over to the Kangadil, Duchi Pumbusira. Pumbushibu Karu, my Ingarazo, you then get the land Duchi Pumbusira, Lela Chana. Sobo Pasha, Sempasha, Soacha, Dushicha. The my Ingen Pumbu. Whereas you then get a condom I get $3 over Carina. The Zolan Duchi Pumbusira. 풍부가 마도 가줄 개매도아 아주 요새도 어때질랑나 야
Mm. So here then, dependently originated or dependent arising, by contemplating this, the way in which things arise due to many causes and conditions, this can allow us to have an idea of emptiness. We can have a sense of emptiness arise in the mind. And so here there is then dependent origination in the sense of being dependent upon causes and conditions. And then there is dependent designation. So here, when we talk about like the person is being the one who experiences suffering and happiness and so forth. This person is something which is designated in dependence upon any of the 5 aggregates. So it could be on the basis of a person's form. We designate, oh, that is a person, or on the basis of their consciousness. And so here again, we have these 5 kind of aggregates. Our form is substantially existent. That has a form to it as a kind of substance, whereas our consciousness is not established as having any kind of form or substantiality to it, but in dependence upon this collection of the 5 aggregates or any of the 5 aggregates, we designate a person. We have this idea of an I. And so this can come again from like looking at someone's aggregates, seeing that form and thinking, oh, that is a person. Or it can arise, we can have a sense of I based upon our thoughts or our feelings. Like when we have various feelings. This is one of the 5 aggregates. And this is the component of having that sense of pleasure or pain in relation to various things. Then there is our kind of discrimination or discernment, where we have a sense of refining, like, or identifying things. Oh, this is good, or this is bad. This is a house. This is a person, and so forth. And then there is the the 5th aggregate of, I'll translate it as conditioning factors. And this here is referring to the kind of karmic imprints that have been laid down, particularly as related to our intentions. When we have those kinds of intentional acts that we engage in, like, oh, I need to deceive somebody, and then we go and we do that, or we, oh, I need to benefit somebody, and so forth. This kind of 5th aggregate is sort of the catch-all for the things that don't fit into the other aggregates of feeling, form, feeling, consciousness, or discrimination. And so here, other than our 5 aggregates, there's nowhere that we can locate or designate the person. So in this way, the person is said to be something that is designated in dependence upon this basis of designation, any of the 5 aggregates.
Oh yeah. So 풍부하고 가는 게 라떼네 파따기도 하고 dit 이 멘다르세도 뜻이레스 맹다라 dit 따레샤스 맹다 dit 발라레스 dit 미레세라 미나네 뜻이레 뜬두레 세레레세 바 맹다기도 와 근데 거랑에서는 미 소소 맹디 랍소나 뜻이슬라서 나의 삼산남사 그 땡기도 anga 뜻이 삼차야로도 제고 명다제 문제 제일 봐 뜻이 서마다 그 랑운의 뜻이지 개요 말아 랑운의 뜻이지는 கொஞ்சம் 명마다 그는 뜻이 감각 통고 그래 되게 통고요 말아 전도 뜻이 개요 말아 봐 명다기도 와 명다네 근데 그 소보치로서나 뜻이 두고도세 소보 때보면도나 뜻이 또 나기도 세라 뜻이 내가 지도 라고가 지치고네 뜻이 내가 지도 서라 라고도 뜻이 말아 소보 뜻이 말아 다네시 sembatmejiwa chidona semmejiwa choachina tatire 뜻이 기분면도세 tatire ko sembat cho야보레도나 다 뜻이 대화도 기부도세 나들이 기부여 삼든데 삼기도 와 자꾸 풍부하고 가로 되게 자와제바 칠래야 아니 간사 되게 자와제바를 샤고 그러마도 자와쟁게 로가게요 말에 풍부하고 가로 레테 셴바치 라와치요 말에 이나 가란조 삼려나 가리어서도 나가서도 라와도 두바르죠 땡에 소보라 땡에 고라 땡에 라고라서 땡에 초아르네 셰바레 라 티 카가체 소스데 야 로소 라완도 투버시 삼기도 와 나서 라완도 투버 랑은에 치여 삼게래 또저 소고레 텔로 왕 쪽에를 시다 간갈 까당갱이 소럽시 치여 삼기도 와 텔레야 라완도 투버 짐바서 나주 삼르 나래 다 라완도 투버티 요래 랑은에 랑게 ngo에서 나서 랑게 ngo에 나라치 투비 삼게마도 풍부가 라마 인게 풍부가를 때네파 아니 메즈고 트래시스 따과 대삼게 나요 삼로 지금 말해 뭐네 전에 팀마도 깨요 말해 따게 풍부가고 가는 거 자와체서는 따게 자와체를 샤오로 자와체게 로가지 풍부라 만들어지 로가요 말해 드라보지 속볼 때네 공부접도시던 조기 세월마도 공부접에 마이게지 로가지 드라보 동게 가사지 로스게 요 말어 자코 코라 마이게 닥시스그라 닥시암 차셔서 줘라 강바르진에 고다 개고 찍바 사발라 소바르르르데 코 차셔만 보여라 어때서 차셔서 그래 닥시래 대달 때는 내 강바르에서 봤다셔라 티나네 찍디레 세시요 말에 입대 말에 카도대 말에 르르르네 말에 이나 텔레테네 딱바 참바 강바샤 그래 강바 야부도세 라 강바 시소세 건더치 시소나 강바 시소세 샤고도 티나시 다단다 가르셔서네 풍부하고 가로 되게 자와체바들 다가 자와체 샤고도 이나 가라저고 삼레날이야 풍부하고 가로 그 자와체바들 로소 소소 나랑 지금 내 누구요 삼 나 누구요 삼사로 내 내가 지금 삼사 나오 냠도 내 지금 삼 로가지 삼로 거기도 와 어떤 내가 라마한테 요 말을 쓰고래 풍부하고 가로를 땡지 딱 봤으면서 로 왕게 샤과삼 차셔다 닥실에 때네 로그 내지지인다 스밍다소나 대참기래 마도 코체네 라예지 요 말에 나라도 삼르나 여반에서 라와지 요 말에 라와지 요나 따체네 라고로 거기래서 소부데네 마르와서 라와 따데 셈데네 마르와서 대 말을 풍부가버리를 생각마도 요 마팅하는 가야 되고도 와 텔레 로스야 다시 요르베스는 공부 세븐나시 로가치 로스야 요 말아 어떻게 되고 풍부가부 가루나 때네 딱와 다녀지 왕게 샤과 닥시단 도실라 떼진 렐네 여봐 닥시단 도실라 떼네 여봐 닥시단 도실라 떼네는 그 여봐 차기어마도 닥시단 도실 때문에 그저 고라라왕 그 여봐시 가사이 방아이 바시 주에면도 어디 럽지 럽다 다티 간데 마도체서 야
So here it is then independence upon any of the 5 aggregates that we designate a person. So we see someone's form, a particular form, and we say, oh, that's Tashi, or oh, that's Tundrup. And we see like the person has this kind of thought that they exist from their own side, not just merely designated upon whatever of the 5 aggregates. But if it were the case that, say, Tashi were established from his own side, then it would have to be that anyone who encounters the 5 aggregates with that form would immediately think Tashi, would just have that kind of recognition. But that isn't the case. But when we see someone like moving, we see their form aggregate moving, we say, oh, he's going. Or certain activities like, oh, he's sick, or oh, he's speaking, based upon the kind of mental thoughts that they're having, like, oh, Tashi's unhappy today, and so forth. We designate independence upon that, but when we try to search for, well, where's the Tashi, other than the activity of the aggregates, whether it's like that mental unhappiness or the physical, the form moving, we can't find some kind of Tashi that exists, or some kind of person that exists from their own side. We designate independence upon any of those 5 aggregates, the collection or any of the 5, a person, but they don't have this kind of existence from their own side. Yet we have this sort of sense as though there were a separate, like, I that were somehow sort of in charge of the aggregates. Like, we think, oh, this is my head, and this is my hand, and this is my body, and so forth, as if there were this autonomous I established from its own side that kind of controls these aggregates. And we have in our thoughts this sense of this I as existing from its own side, independent of being designated on this particular basis of designation. So again, if we were to look beyond the 5 aggregates, there's nothing aside from the 5 aggregates that we could point to as being the person. But yet when we say, like, if someone is going, we say, oh, Tashi is going. That physical movement, that form, that isn't Tashi. That one aggregate isn't actually the person. So here, again, there's this relationship of dependent designation that on a particular basis of designation, or on a particular appearance, a basis of arising, we then designate something like you see a collection of walls and windows and doors and so forth, and designate, oh, that's a house. But when we try to find, well, what is the house within that? That's nothing beyond that mere designation. You can't find some sort of house that exists from its own side. But yet we can still say that the house exists. It exists as a mere dependent designation. And so when our aggregates do this basis of designation does a particular action, we can say, oh, I did that thing, but we can't actually identify some sort of person or self that is separate apart from those aggregates, that exists beyond being a mere designation, being merely posited by mind. So if we search for the thing designated within the basis of designation, it's actually not something that we can find, but it's still appears. So again, other than, we have this sense generally that, like, there's this I that is kind of in control of the aggregates. But if one is to search for that, you can't find something apart from the aggregates themselves that is that self, but yet there's nothing you can point to within the aggregates that is that self. So therefore, the person, the self, is a mere designation. So here, this level of dependent designation means that in dependence upon a particular basis of designation, there's the act of designating, and that sort of merely designated existence is the conventional existence of phenomena.
Oh yeah, that and that kongobo. Then that was the Rawatu Trubat Medua. Ngarantu namji samlu nalia nga se soso ge rawa cheche ngarang chi yo sam ge do shanda phungbu ta chowa ta dushi ta chi shibuche le to chin drel ne ene nga cha ku yo sam ge me do to so pa sha ne soso yo na re she rawa du truba se ro rawa du truba rawa wa se do rawa chi yo ma re shanda le to chin drel ne ko de re se ming zam ji pa sha ju re ma do Rama inge dinrek mambochi tsone tezuli pa mingtane chi res labgidwa. Ane soso ge wa tenrechi samna nyomo chondu ra. Nga tene takwa samato nga rawa shivachi me samna. Ane nga samda rawa du truba yu sam nga la shensha kiya ta. Nga la shensha shukchenpo yu de. Ane nga yi se ra nga mingta nawa lu ta. Nga yi se shensha shukchenpo ta. Tezu yungu marwa. Nyomo chondu dhoya tondaliya. Nyomo tsawa ne pa meba soya tondaliya tongba nyi de komgora, tame komgora. Nyomo yongsa tsawa de sosu tsane ngugura ngo tsusa de. Nga sam nga rawa chik. Nga pungbu ta chi tezu la to chin drel ne shama gunga nga ra rangi chi rangzu toba sigira. Tak soba, che soba sigidwa. Nga rangzu samba nashi nga de yona ko tse ne nye yoba chi kore. 딱제 전에 nga samza rawa chune tikagi bas kabando se sokbu nal duge sokbu dire semre simjung nal duge tele los duge tinde chena raya yo mare anta nga me resne me mare tene takba samla nga sha gore tezule techen delne ene tezule chen dimandi chonsuna nga duge nga tege nga na sha nga cheche site sha gora so didu nyonge che nga yo me mare rawa de yo mare Tenjin Debar Joan some the Yore, so this some Kona, ane ngāla shenja de chōru chōru wara. ane ngāye samsa samlu de chōru wara, shenja de. Chita ngā yore, tene takwa tsami ngāta ngāye ta, ngāye kāngba ta, ngāye chicha yora. Ngāra zuba shuk chenpo chi jagidwa ngāde tsawa ne ya shu, ane ngāye chicha shuk chenpo yode shenja shuk chenpo yore. Shenja shuk chenpo yode tezu dan ring mandi, ti tengin dan ring mandi chonsa, ane kondu shuk chenpo yongo wara. Tene chakna, tene chanda kanga ngāji chado le sa kanga yongo wara. Tezu yonsa tsawa de ngā samsa samlu tangda de mandi ne yongo wara se. Tende tongpa nye taa me paa se de. Nyomo tsawa ne paa me pa soku ne ti samlu tangu ra. Ngāra zo ti samlu tang takja che ne tang ngā de rāngwa chi nge samlu kora ne shi yo na. Ene soku de rewe se, soku nāla ngā rāngwa chi duwe se, susu kangdi ne che samlu tang nālo nāngja kari yo re. Yān de ne che leba da kanga samlu tang mindu samna. Soku nāla ngā rāngwa chi minduwa. ane meke sheba, nawe sheba, naya sheba, che sheba tuzuru tiye yo mara, rawa nga yo mara. Tsoa dewa dunga tangyo tu tiye mara. Tende tse na ko ragu me duwa, yinba chi me duwa, ti me du ta, tene takwa tsam se. Chu tamze tene takwa tsam. Dakshi da chashe la tene, lo pa takwa te tsam ki ko chawa chingi chi shawar ma to, rawa ti yo mara, o ti sunza. Dacha shetan timu sumsi shekidwa namju ganzo. Siba kolo ti chi tu zan, tsawa tili pakpa chi che, ane chui chi che, cha chi che sukdwa. Mangbu tangbu yonsa di pakpa de, mishibe mongba. Soso ne chui de soso haku mara, soso kande yinba de soso haku yo mara. Soso ne tango ne le meba chi soso yoba samlo kukdwa. Tila mongba ase, norjen samlo koya, tila mongba pakpa de shak yora. ane docha chache shetan tuk chuche dosu kiwre tele tene tende yana chunyi shenda kanga yungore se yora o tati rob silav na drismang dos ya
So here, although we have this sense of this I or self that is somehow like autonomously established, that isn't like connected or dependent or contingent upon our aggregates, really, when we begin to examine and look at this, the I, the self, is a mere name that's posited on that basis. And thinking about it in this way, that although it seems as though we have this like independent, autonomous kind of self that exists from its own side, when we reflect on this and see that no such self exists, this helps to reduce our afflictions. The strong kind of clinging and grasping attachment to our own side comes from the sense that we have this sort of like autonomous I. And in order to get rid of our afflictions and get rid of them from their roots, we contemplate this kind of dependent origination, this understanding of emptiness, of selflessness. Again, there's this sense of that there's like an I that exists from its own side, that's somehow able to bear analysis, that if we were to search for it, we could find something that we could point to. And when we then begin to look within that basis of designation, the aggregates, well, is the I in the form? Is it in our various, like the parts of our physical body? No, we can't point to it there. We can't point to it within our consciousness or our various feelings and so forth. None of those things individually can be identified as this I or this self. And so we might think, well, does that I not exist? Well, no, the I does exist, but as a mere dependent designation. There is an I that experiences happiness and suffering. There is an I that goes and comes and so forth, but it doesn't have the kind of existence that we attribute it to, that it appears to have when we sort of think of I. And so that strong kind of, so long as we have that strong grasping at an I, that sort of strong clinging, we will have an attachment to our own side and this kind of aversion, animosity toward others that again lead us to create non-virtuous actions. And so it is through this meditation on emptiness and selflessness that we can get rid of those afflictions. If it were the case that such an autonomous, independent kind of an I existed, it would have to be something that we could point to. Like it would have to be, say, within our form aggregate, or is it within the various consciousnesses, our visual, our mental, our oral consciousness, and so forth. If it were the case that it existed in that way that it appears, we would have to be able to locate it. But as we go through these various things, our various minds, our various feelings, the various discriminations that we engage in, there's nothing that we can point to, but there is a merely designated I, something that is designated on this basis of designation, a whole put on these parts. And so here, as we often see in the sort of a visual depiction of dependent origination, in the center, it's depicting this pig and a snake and a hen, which represent our three fundamental poisons of ignorance, attachment, and hatred. And so here it is that fundamental ignorance, that not knowing, that delusion that leads us to then have attachment and hatred, and again, continue to cycle in samsara.
Oh yeah. Oh, that and there can go top the shirab knees, so ni shigdoa. Shirab de la chida mambuyor, shirab mambuyore. Ne shirab de so the tameto be shirabase. Oh, tombanito be shirabase, what the Numozawa Nepa, Mavswet and Dallas, the Comco Yora. The Namsada, Samlata, Namsako, Namokanga Shindu Tende, Law Parta, Membakanga Namsa Yandra Tende, Yomare. Toma Mebane, Meticho, the Letanzida, Tazul Com de Ora. Tina coach Samlutana, Madame Melu Samlata, oh, Tene Rao, Tanam Young attended some Gura, Tendete, Mendua, Samsa, Assembly Shagina. Pengi wara, tene yar dura. Di ngazu komcha mare shenda chere samsa ngay yungu mare samsa yushane ko yushare yungu marwa. Tawa shi chamba da nyingji chanju semse to susu samlu tangura. Semje sule chawachi yuwa mare sam. Tawa da tunge nyonge re sam. Sule tunge mayo sho sam. Semje toa sam tunge mayo. Tawa da demba churchi samsa. Tende samlu koyene semje kanga tundu ne ko yar dre yara ngazo. Chi kom situ za namsa kom ne namsa chi chaya yo namle pisal ju tende cheche ko marwa. Semlin juwa ta ya tunda rete yara. Tede ko rangsur negi yo mare ke kom na ke pengi medu sam tengi ro ngazo namsa chi pene soa shibuji chongu re tende ke yungu marwa. Bet kewa mangbo ne pajo mitin chodel kom de yara. Ine kom ne ko Nema Nashinja Degi Omare, Tar Ruyor, and Garazo saw the left to Maranamsa Madoko Chum, how do you shank Chum Changere Genera, Chum Change, Sobo Changere Gena, Kochana, Comba doing gas, Portuguena, that in a China, Causation, Yandre Omar, and to me China, Dine Koyas about Chum to it, and they Omara, Sajendo Nevera. Sajendo. Sobu comdid chairs, Sajan Gavere. Shida subso machane, Tambu Comba Nishum Togune, subso machane Comba Nishum Domare. Comba Chuchanga, Manur, Nyakayora. Or the Chamba, the Ninji Chanju, Simse, Sembu in there to Kaze Kumgi in there. Sajan do neg Maricha, Sajan Dili Yarn Dry or Maris, Sajan. Mariko yarn do yore, Namsa yarn do Adenga Shibicha Hakotu Marwa. Namsang will say the way on Marto. Shingle Surge Taksha, now Tento Yakalikali with the Namsa or the hop to Kaliaki, Singa Hako Medua, Kalikali Yar do Yordo, or Tinashe. Chambani Chanju Sim from the Taj Shida Yarn do Medua some Tisame Mere. Langdur Janela Tezum Rabchi Chosen, oh, Dihako Sons, Chihako, na Tarbe Shitsu were in Shada. Tarbas a Kamba Masun Chibajasa Zingma, Dingaki Shirab de Zuyorko. Kalika Liz Tended and Rechane, Awuja Hako, Tezum Mavche, and a Samlutan Yandro Mado. Namsan Samlutan Adaga, Ganga Topa Chetis, Tendem set over Yomato. Oh, yeah, teach learn do that, yeah.
So here we need to develop, again, method and wisdom in order to get to the state of Buddhahood. And it's important. There are many different types of wisdom, but this wisdom realizing emptiness, this wisdom of dependent origination and emptiness is extremely important. It is on this basis that we can eliminate the root of samsara. But we shouldn't have this sense that it's like, oh, well, like sort of like turning on a light. When you turn on a light, the darkness is instantly eliminated. It isn't the same way with this. We have to habituate our mind. We use this word sort of meditate, but meditate has this connotation of habituation. We can't expect to immediately generate a feeling about these things, but rather it takes repeated reflection, contemplation again and again in order to create that kind of transformation within our mind. Like things like love and compassion. We also need to contemplate, to think about these things in order for them to improve, to come to see other sentient beings as just the same as us. We have to think, oh, they too experience suffering and want to have happiness and so forth. We need to actually work with our mind, think about these things and generate a kind of experience through repeated reflection, through, again, accustomizing ourselves to or habituating ourselves to these things. So it isn't instant. We can't sort of expect for something to be like flipping on a light switch and all of a sudden all of that darkness is gone. But rather, if we do engage in this way, we mentally engage with these topics, we won't remain the same. We will improve. Our mind will develop and improve. So when it comes to things like sort of physical activities, like if you're wanting to jump really far or something like that, you can, you don't expect to immediately be able to jump as far as you will be able to jump, but rather you train your body and you get to a point where maybe you can do like a certain really long length of a jump. But it's the case that for our physical kinds of trainings, there's a limit to those things. There's a limit past which you won't be able to jump. You won't be able to improve anymore. But when it comes to our mental improvement, that kind of mental development, there isn't that same limit. There is no limit to our ability to develop love and compassion and bodhicitta and so forth. And so, again, we don't expect instant results with these things. It's not as though you plant your crops and you go back a minute later and expect them to have sprouted, but rather these are things that take time. We plant these seeds, and with continued habituation and the right kind of conditions, they will bring forth fruit. So these sorts of things are like creating the foundation of the kind of house of our liberation. So again, if we take the time to mentally engage with these things, that's how we'll generate a real feeling and develop the kinds of realizations, these mental realizations not having the same kind of limit as our physical activities.
Oh yeah, Tenjin Debar Junga Mawa Sedo, Tadilia, Tenjin Debar Junga Mawa de Susure, Tendishagora, Tadinalia, Namba Sanjebe, Tutamawa Namne, Nuju Jinji, Ngabonam, Rangi Kutan Ken, Deba Samla Tenjin Debar Junga, Mawa Yenlas, Namba Kangake, Nujin Jiden, the Chuji Simjala Soba, Tezo, Sama Tamjete, Jiden Chebabo, Takbak Chebabo. Oh, the Chisola Soba, Tendek Chevamare, Kudankin, Tobala Tenji, the Injurewangene, the Tukio Rese, the Nazo Tenjin Deberjua, Salujang Bedok of Songuva, Tenjin Deberjua, Sumta, Nachi Songudua, you are maybe Kalaten Choas Chimba. Kudankin Sosona, and I couldn't ever kill Gurese. Kudankin Matsone Kigmare, Kudankin Kanga Sosona. Shandaji Magina Samna Koke, Kujin Matsona, Kena Samna and Julian Chebabo, Kena Samna Ketugumare. Could I get so much of Remato Shandaji W. Maida Tendel Kukeva Mare Sigora. Nako Yoamebas, Kulungi Yoake Tekumar, Shandal Tekumare, Koran Musutoya, good and King Karikutuna Titi, Tonde Titsosonanico Keungre. Timatsone Kigmare Sigora. Yoa maybe Calatani Choas, Kulungi Samlo, Kokena, Samsa, Magina, Samsa, Tindikanki, Chebabu, Loyal and Kilmaris, Tira. Yoa maybe Calatani Choa. Midaba to make a chua. Jutan Ken de Midaba Kormado, Tagwe Judan Ken Shiki Yomare. Midaba to make it, I can't Judan Ken Mamutsa Waltani Kiwamado, Juchi Kasarama Chiksuki Shiomara. Midaba to make a litany choice. Nube can let any choice. Then Jukanga and Drew Kigmar, so Timu by kitchen never you are. Santabchin Sabin that was a Tembecha Chira. Temba Tensa de Chira. Shooters of in a Lembecha Chira. And the trade of Ya long to Ya Keg Chira. Never Timu mind by Judan can so never reality. Kigamato, Gucci Kanga Yonzo de Keto Maresibora. Nube can let any choice at him. Sum Chanetimba, Tinding as the Carcer. Not Chabane, Judan Chabalation at Sanisigra, Jumani Kigmara, Judan Chani Kigura, can be by any Jumani Kigisura, Judan Chabalation choice. And the Tabo maybe can let any choice. Tabo won't you change and that's unity, one will kill Marisera. Oh, yeah, Mawa Teleta, 10 rebels, Mawas, the Chirubal Yomar, Namba Kangaris, the Shagura. Yeah, this is one.
So then turning back to the text in this section on 59, the proponents of dependent arising. So again, whereas proponents of Buddhist tenets assert that all composite things, both animate and inanimate, arise in dependence on merely their respective causes and conditions, proponents of non-Buddhist tenets do not assert such a dependent arising. So here, when it comes to the ways in which those Buddhist proponents think of dependent arising, they first assert that there is no sort of dependent, production from a cause that is the sort of will of a divine creator. So for them, there are these three sort of conditions, 3 or 5 conditions of dependent arising. And so it's not as though there is the necessity for the will, the intention of a creator in order to bring forth a result. Rather, if you have the coming together of all of the necessary causes and conditions, then that's going to bring forth that result. There's no need for some sort of a will or a kind of divine creator to be involved. Only those sorts of causes and conditions that we can observe, that we can see, are necessary to bring forth the kind of result at hand, not the will or thought of a divine creator. So the first, again, is production that is from a cause that is not the divine a divine creator's will. And second characteristic is that this is production from multiple impermanent causes. To assert that a permanent kind of a cause can bring forth results is not logical, is not tenable. And so too, to assert that one cause could bring forth a result, there are numerous causes and conditions that are necessary to bring forth a result, not just a single kind of a cause. And then it needs to be a cause that has the ability, the capacity to give rise to that particular effect. It's not as though anything can generate anything, but rather something needs to have the particular capacity to generate a particular effect. And so again, we have like with the various elements, the earth element has the quality of supporting, and the water of moistening and so forth, heat, fire of sort of ripening. It's not as though even those exist intrinsically independently of themselves. Those causes and conditions come together, and that's how things come into being. And so then there are, if we expand out to sort of 5 conditions of the cause, the fourth is that there is an existent cause. Those like the Charvakas who assert the kind of causeless production, this refutes that idea. Something has to exist in order for it to be able to bring about a result. And then finally, the 5th kind of quality is having a selfless cause. Not the case that there's some sort of like self-existent kind of a cause, like whether it's a divine creator or something like that. And so those who assert these 3 or 5 kind of conditions of causality are proponents then of dependent arising.
Oh, yeah, that did. Yeah. Tadi chunin de darisido. Tadi shende teda lengashi nese shende sudengema sanje chumden de pebe kapkiro. Kagage ne tudama shenda tu sigara. Shende teda lengashi kenese tudama gashi ke nichi jengabo denam jume bale kewa yese kambimba tabu jume yore. Juyo mara kurata gaske yore se rangju de sigara. Oh, yang gashi ke juyo se. Gyude tambu gyude takba res, takba chitso serva. Gyud takba tende kesegara. Gyud takba gashi ki dusun debu rani, gyud tangi do ngombar mesewe chi, ngombar mesewa shi, lar ngombar sewar kiwala. Gyud takba chitso sede takba re. Di nekam na kun debu kanga yoyo re, nganzu ngusum ki yudu sel tupke wa mare. Ane paruchele kong de chitso wa chu zhe yong re. 조여서는 가지고 숨도 통경은 bar 세게 요래. 당분에 응bar 규도서 매경이 되부지요 말했어요라. 지수에 돼서 대부 강가 요래. 나저 통통고 요 말해. 이 제마 그래서는 옹봉 무슨 규도 수세토고 요래서. 규도서 매ven 되부 요 말했어요. 당분에 규도서 되부 요 말아. 규도서 되부 요 말해. 규도긴 좋아지는 치수 되부 깨고라. 당이 동원bar 메세와라. 여바 실라리 한번 세월 개와 기여래서 라레 랑신기 주베 다니 셴베 주딱바다서니야 라레 랑신기 주베 타데 연계게 주딱바 뒤딱바 세라 뒤텐딱바 세라 너와 네 원주 딱바 세라 텐델 텐이 기그레 스케일링이 와라 대조 강가 땡지 대버죠 아마 어디 말해서 와라 랑신기 주베 다니 rāngshīngi chūpe tāñi che kyu shenle tene kyo tāñi tādebe kyu tākpa tā tūten shami tākpa tā yā tākpa rāngshūngi jiktenji cheba bōso o tēsuli tene kyo yin sikdwa kisunza tenre mawa rikyo mara so tōme kyu chik ni ne kyo so tāmbu kyu di chik mato yo mara tēli tene tē tākpa che tīka eni drebu kāka chikire sora Shiriba deva yu chese. Parto drebu ngobo nam. Ori alitiba chilam na ya.
So then continuing in the text, it says, the proponents of non-Buddhist tenets do not assert such a dependent arising, and their assertions are as follows. So here the Charvakas hold that the world and its inhabitants were self-existent from the beginning, produced without any cause. So here this is the idea of the things being causeless, that they're just sort of self-existent without having any sort of cause necessary for their arising. Or you can have the Samkhya, the Samkhyas who assert that in effect, which is the same nature as its cause, exists concurrently with this permanent cause, but in a non-manifest nature. So the Samkhyas who assert some sort of like a primary substance that is the substrate of everything, they would say that all results exist at the time of that cause, but they exist in this non-manifest nature and later become manifest at the time of their sort of resultant phase. But here, that's again not logically coherent with asserting dependent origination. And then still others hold that things are produced from the outset by a single permanent cause, whether this cause be a permanent entity called time, which is an intrinsically established cause with a different nature from its effect. So something like an idea of time being that which is the creator of everything, that's somehow permanent and it is intrinsically different from the effects that it creates, or whether it is to assert that there is a permanent partless atom-like particle serving as the building block of the entire world system, wherein one would then assert that that's sort of the single permanent cause of everything that arises, or whether that kind of cause is asserted to be a self-existent permanent divine creator. So these are the kinds of views that non-Buddhists that do not accept dependent origination would assert.
Oh yeah. Parto se tambo chidu tinde chero, parto nebe kapsigo da. Chene negro nebe kapsigo. Debi ngobo nam chene ja kechi chene ja kechi lan jiba mahimbe ngor nebadas. Namba sanje bene ko kesa na ngobo condition kechi re ne jidu gyora. Kana ngara mi ro mi sombo chete ora. Mi sombo chete yobade ko kechi re ne gyugin sani ya chigi cheguro mado. Ngar kesa de rawando chene sombo chete yo mardo. 우당고도 칼라사오르 강가시 시비줄 뜻인 될 거고도 교진 대절 때는 그도 선부시 대교 얼마도 선부세도 딱 버려서 라왕 제제 교매버시 생에만 손 대베 단도 손 대든데 되어 말아 그도 교진을 때고도 때고도 가시 루블루블 또고 매버샤 신도겠는데 요고도 어째서 그도 교진 강가 끼기야 선부 대고라 매도라 차선데 매도도가 고야 선부체 야부체 중부체 대도가 그도 추다 롱다 저도 따다다다시 거래티야 산슈거마다 코라 라완체 추대게 요마라 제 트레치란 남사티 치르 추감선나 남사 건주안도 살마티 치라 어디 손자 가서래 바르도 내바나야 뭐고 가게데 깨지린 줄고 와래 아주 로도 차딩이 되기도 와 तारा तगने पर तंदा तेशा समगोरती मारो केजी ने जिगे वारा क्यों केंगे जिगे शिराती मैंने लोग ड्रोसों योंग मारो फिर ड्रो दे योरा इन्हें को क्यों थे से दे को लो बाहर से देख दो इन्हें को फिर जिगे चेगोरा तिन्हें सिंगारा जो संबंध दे जुजिंग कांगे छाने या संबंध दे योर मातो तगेंगे मत संबंध दे बदे रावण से देने ता जुजिंग करचे ने मजे ने को संबंध दे चियो मारा düce 탐제 깨지 맛은 남버셔너라 düce 탐제 메다버서 깨지 락바 교대데 지나면서 하고 요라 락바 담불로 춘주든데 다 깨샤 다 된데 샤샤 싱댕에 맞춘주 다 된데 락바데도 하고 요 무슨도 통거래 메다바 락바 교하치 뭐데 깨지레레레네 교한도 요데 하고 요 마도 남버 산제 마도 신다게 티셰요 말해 요한도나 가진지 때 엔터내시네 매버차그레 세르시마도 깨지 요한도네 미다바레스 시에요 말아 걸레서 네바다 바도 데병어보 남 깨내자 깨지란 지고 말해서거라 깨지란 지나 건조 자와 제토고 말해 삼겨라 깨지란 지나 자와 제토고 말해 로도스 깨지 지기 와데 가서 미타야다 빼절로야다 강가 팬토도 와 지선자 그 깨지마이나 자와 제토그래 남바체는 미다바이나 내가 제토그래 미다바 마이나 따바이나 자와 제요 말해서 그 유르제 찍나 신제 대샤나 아니 내가 제토 말와 미다바 선자니 그 자와 제요래 대병어보 남께내게 깨지마 마이 봐라 많이 병어로 내봐. 다른 직반아야 랑게 잡에 교대라 팀들 좋아. 파른 직도도 당신바 도주네 지소를 봐 팀버스라 담부 수트게 저를 봐 팀도를 시거라. 지금 제바 보케는 뜻수 되버라 다 고금에도 섬수 되샤버서. 근데 kelling 말아서네 때 남바네 때 kelling 말도. 드럼 라니 제바 보강게 제바때 수르 되반 되바인 라서 kumba umaba dana drebu kewesu shende deba tedar inanese umaba na shinchigena drebu kewesu shende tezoge deba na shitende inase gora shenji tukta ma atu sora chagage tedane gyumebale kewase kashege mitumbe jole kewase mitumba sana drebu de kewalan drebu teda kewada tumbe jushi kora ko chawanali kengenge ngobuchene ko teda tumbe chawayo siji kora Ramuna Gengesne Tramu Kesha Kevura. Koran Timbe Yeneng Juda, Teda Timbe Lenji Chicken, Guchelitani Kigrimado, Tagwa Yengengi, Kuchik, Drebu Chicken, and Mitumbe Julie Kedora. 주대 깨와 대단 레부대 깨다 그 틈부치 거라 주 유로치다 레부 깨와 틈부 매버치 주 딱바치 레가치 마치 대대게 레부 간르스키 그래서 거라 저 제도고 말하네 딱배 레부 깨게네 딱고 거라 예바sam마도 셴다 거 말와 네 딱바르스 레부 깨게바 연구를 딱배 레부 깨나 야나 뒤치라 마지는 살 그뒤나 깨요 말고 kabri maje yukashel ke yukashel maje na karesne juandro ge judele juandro de ko juandro ayese tigi yongo yordo se takba yena ne debul juandro et de yongo mare nambo chana kange cheba te do uma batana debu ke we chu shende de ba te da yena te da ne jume ba da mitembe chule debu ke wa mitembe chule 교와다 교매생게 가셔가네 미팅배 교래때 교한데도 오시거라 소아 임배세 이런 대부남 주단견라 대신 대바라 조아 매배로 대절이야 대부도 대신 대바라 중에 교와식 말에서 대신 대바라 중에 교와서는 주단견라 대신 대유로체네 대내감네 수타요 하더라 대신 대바라 중에 그래서 건조들이 대신 대바라 중에 된다고 말해서 maybe shende te dan de ba namne tenjin de bar jwa ma ma yin ho so konzo ten de ma ma re se de chidan de chule ten de bu chi re se da lab ke ro ina ko ngone tane kisu de yo ma re jambe ba ge be de nye de na ton do yong re de se ge ji ma ra nge ma jambe ba yo ra shinga tab kan do chi che konzo chwa ke ho ra tele ten ti chi gu do sam ge wa ra jomile ke se ko tang bu jung da se sam tang ge jin ma do 다가서 교면에 끼그레세 내가 마셔나 칼라라그레세 세게 말어 건조게 자티 텔레테네 끼그레세 라바 참게텐지 레버니 좀 세게 말해 준 조르와 체년에 준 조르와 체티 내가 난 대부께 와서 고야라 야 디버지 지주나
So, then these proponents of non-Buddhist tenets assert that once the things that are the effects have been produced, their entities remain without perishing each moment. So here, according to Buddhists, everything is not only impermanent, but it's not only dependently originated in the sense of depending upon causes and conditions in order for it to come into being. But once that effect has come about, it doesn't sort of abide or remain in any way. Rather, things are momentary. So here, this again, when we look at all of the kinds of ways that things function and are, some people suddenly die. There's one condition that is out of whack, and then suddenly they don't have the proper sort of causes and conditions to sustain life. It's not as though once a person is living, they are then living. That is the sort of state that they are at, and it's no longer subject to causality, or in the ways that some of these non-Buddhists might assert. Or like if you have a flower, again, a flower, it's beautiful, it's there. It's not as though once that flower comes into being, it then just remains, but rather it's changing moment to moment to moment. And it is necessary for it to have the right kinds of causes and conditions for it to stay that way. So here we can give lots of examples of this, and sometimes we get confused because, for example, the electricity is on. So we have light that is here, and it seems like that light is sort of steady, it's stable, but it's actually dependent upon, and that's because there's a kind of continuity to the result that's coming about. But there's actually a momentariness to it. There's causes and conditions happening in every moment in order to bring forth that kind of light that we are experiencing. And so all composite phenomena are momentary in this way. It's not as though you have the cause and conditions come together, and then that produces a result that somehow has a kind of nature that could abide. According to Buddhists, everything is, again, momentary. And it's easier for us to understand sort of coarse levels of impermanence. We can see, oh, I'm not the same as I was when I was a child. I get older. Oh, that tree gets bigger, and so forth. We can see that things change over time. But to have this kind of understanding of momentariness, of the fact that things are perishing in every moment, this is much more subtle. And it is a view that is asserted uniquely by the Buddhists. And so here, for this, those that would assert that there needs to be some sort of abiding nature, that causes and conditions produce a particular result, and then that must abide somehow. For them, they think that, well, if everything were to disintegrate in every moment, to perish in every moment, then how could anything function? But it's actually the opposite of that, that if there were some sort of static existence, we wouldn't be able to have functionality. It is only because things are momentary, changing moment to moment to moment, that they are able to function. If things were permanent, they couldn't function. Again, like if they're a permanent cause, it would always have to be generating results or never have done that. There's no ability for it to be occasional in any way. And so continuing in the text, this again being the view of those non-Buddhists, they would say that once the things that are the effects have been produced, their entities remain without perishing each moment. When such effects finally do perish, they either dissolve back into their initial cause or are withdrawn by the divine creator. So here again, this is the sort of view of those the results manifest and then they dissolve back into that primal, the primary cause and so forth, or they're withdrawn by the divine creator. Well, from the Madhyamika perspective, if an effect were to be produced in the manner that such non-Buddhists assert, it would be produced either causelessly or from discordant causes. So here, again, if it were the case that things were produced in this way that non-Buddhists assert, they either have to assert that there is no cause or that there is a sort of a discordant cause that leads to these various things. So for those that assert some kind of a permanent cause, that would be a discordant cause. If you have impermanent things, how could they be caused by something which is permanent? By its very definition, it would either have to always be producing the results or never be able to bring that about. It can't be that there is sometimes a result and sometimes not. In a certain place, there's a result, in a certain place not. And so here, it needs to be the case that there is a concordant sort of a cause. So again, read the text again, because again, if non-Buddhists have to assert that things would either arise causelessly or from some sort of discordant causes. And because such a position runs counter to the view that effects arise in dependence on concordant causes and conditions, such non-Buddhists are not proponents of dependent arising. So here, you would have to then accept that so by contrast, all proponents of Buddhist tenets propound dependent arising. And this dependent arising, again, entails that there be a concordant kind of a cause, as well as that there be a cause rather than things arising causelessly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, this was. You meet up with you, the watching below. Oh, yeah. Can you meet up with you, Kaya Mebar? Nearly the thing or some all in number to that and the Maresra or call it Susana. You then dinam Tomaki and I kiss you, Konda Shebe, Chiribe to the Roanambe. La Shembe to the Ma Chaga to the Ma Shanda Shezu to the Mandra, Sera. Never my engine, you may talk with you, Kaya Mevache. Talk with you, your mother, Mitabe Jujakora. Rarity ngor yurunga nyelenge juda nyele teni debuti ngor sambala trochenge tenji chige ki juda cheba ane kyuji toma chokbala teni chwa yimbe tenji debar chwa ma yinche ta nangba tenji debar chwa ma yinche shende teda tenji debar chwa ma yinche pardo kede neba na ya pardo neba te ya shende chane ko kechi ling gyua chig mara kechi ling gyura chena kechi mateba chen gyua duguyo na ni drebu ke togu mara esa gyura nangba chane ko kechi gyua chena drebu ke togu re kyun tu che lega chig gyura pardo neba na ya gyurmi tu neba mayimba ranga kyuyin le rang trup samne kechi gyura chen gi midaba ngo rang che so de shensa ngobu kande chine kora kesam nyene midaba gyura chen de ko rangshin ki te nyamdo kesam nyene rangche su che sun de wade che rang trup sam nyene midaba ngo ba trup de se rang trup sam nyene midaba ngo ya trup de se gora tambu trup kachin go ne ni midaba chen juan do tinde ke ko mare se gora rangche su che sun de shensa ta rangi ringda chima keshi ge kyujin matsawa ya gejin shenda ge wangi kon jik suna ya ko gejin shenda ge wangi luburdu shikjin jikpa de esi wara dona takbe gyudan cheba be lo yowa meba rangi kewa dan tunbe nipa dan denbe midaba tume ken sawa dan matsawa la sokpa lan drebi ngobu nam tani luburdu keshi luburdu jikpa yinbe ngaji bar somje nega kando yang junme takbe ngor neba misido kyule takba yo mare paru neba tele yang debu ke neba te takba yo mare rawa tama jikpa de ko rangshin ki takbe ngor chen jikpa tende mare se midaba ngor chen jikpa res ya tiba de chikyo na.
So, by contrast, all proponents of Buddhist tenets propound dependent arising. So, they do not accept that the world and its inhabitants came into being in the ways asserted by non-Buddhists described above. So, in contrast to that, they hold that with no permanent unchanging entity as their cause, phenomena arise from an aggregation of numerous causes and conditions. So again, we need to have, as it continues here, that is, an effect arises from both its substantial cause that generates its respective form and cooperative conditions that simultaneously assist the substantial cause in becoming the entity that is its effect. So here it is the case that about one needs to have this substantial cause as well as those things coming together. And once that particular effect or thing, entity has come into being, it doesn't abide even for a moment. There can be a kind of continuity to similar moments, but there is not a static sort of remaining unchanging. So again, continuing here in the text, furthermore, once an effect is produced and abides, it cannot remain without undergoing change. So things are momentary. Immediately upon being produced, an effect has an impermanent nature that changes moment to moment. So there's no sort of coming into existence in a way that then has some sort of permanence or ability to remain, but rather when we see that there is a kind of what appears to be remaining as it continues here, when it disintegrates, it perishes either due to the absence of causes and conditions capable of generating subsequent moments of a similar type in its continuum, or due to meeting with some other unfavorable condition that interrupts its continuity. So it can seem as though something has that again sort of abiding nature due to having moments of a similar type, but the end of that comes when either it's there's an absence of the causes and conditions necessary to sustain that, or there's some sort of unfavorable condition. So again, in summary, a composite thing that is in effect does not arise from a permanent cause that is or from a divine creator's will. Rather, it arises and perishes in dependence on the presence or absence of the many impermanent causes and conditions that have a concordant capacity to produce it. Whether in the beginning, middle, or end, it is never possible for the effect to exist both as a composite entity and as a permanent and unchanging one.
Oh yeah. So now Uma Tenju Esido, Tande Tobacco Yora. Now Uma Tenju a couple de la Sigora. And the Rande Uma Tenju a couple de Rande Tamani Dasa. Rande so Namba Sanje to Dama Shiorba. Dinane Chitrama don Dodeba Semzambatazo Sigora. And the Uma Baja to the Shiora. To the Shanda Sumbutalia. And the Ngoma Sigora, Ngoma, Ngova Tinduma. The Batuki is around when it to your is the killing Yora. Or Tin Uma Tenjo, a channel around when it to Balea, couldn't drive in Namsha Rungio Mare. Or Chesa Conzo attended my regma, couldn't drive Tindup killing to a Uma Tenjo, a channel, Tembatuba, Rawan to Trubalia, Kunde Rongimarvas, Tobacco Yora. Ona Uma Tenjo, come the Rande, the Mani dance. Temanyes ne chiru jito yoba maotele temanyes ira. Shebale ngo tadebe chilo ge soda tiru rekshale soba tezu yore ese. Wa chita mawata doti banyi derita. Semzamba de ya chiru jito yoba marese. Ngo bu kanga semji tangni sambare ese nge tirwa. Temanyes do otele sigora. Semzamba de chidu mebar maotere deora. Ona Uma Tenju a come there, Rande Tamani Tase. Semzamba Namja, Tinjo Mawa Maimba Jude. And it is so attention to Mawa Maimba to us, Uma Tenju and Nashijana. Ra Shira Mawa Dan Dodebe, Nishu Jinjideno, Tasu Tindru Gicule, Joyen Sigura, Jurangwine Truba Yuse. Debu Rangwine Truba Yores, Rangwine Truba Culet and Rangwine Truba Debu Chigres, Judy Tauton Sanania Yokores, Debu Tauton Sanania Yokos, to the Kelling to Aswara. Telekunde Rongimarwas and Aswara. Do the Benishu Genjidan Tausu Tindrugi, Kidigi Lele Kordeve, Kivele Tembatuba Rangwine Trubure, Tigwele Rangwine Trubure, Teleten and Nishugi. Jide Yavada Duga Roa, does a kigres killing doors. Sometimes Bane Lady Pasha, the Kunshit into Shagre, Kunshil leg in the ba, Kidigi leg Pasha and the Tiwang and Debu. They way Kuda to make you to skunk kigors killing Yora. Pasha Tausu Tindudo, Tausu was in a taxation, Sena Raya, but a Tausu was Sigora. Tauseva, Cheseva, Chevacenico, Dires, Ragres, the Conzo. Semzambane Pachagi, Pachagi, Tausu, Semzambane, Legi Pasha, Kidigi Legi Pasha. Tasu Tindugi, Kunshi number she was killing ra. Kunshi Semchi or Sem Tambos the Tate and do Kawada make a Pasha Kangasha, Teleten and Drebu Kanga Kigresiora. Uma Tenju alone dene, Ranshingi Trube, Tengi Kundela, Tenjungi Namsha, Miruara, song basis. Uma Tenju Lulia, Ranshingi Truba, Ramini Trubala, Kudan Drebu Rungumara son doase. Then Namba Sanjebe to them or Shanda Sum Digge, then Rangwine Trube Kudan Kelling to us. You can't Kude Tendri Mao Shana Digmedoase or Tishegora. That they Kundi, Lung the water trunk to a tape and yam to Dansha Divra, Tandachi Warsire. Oh, the dance our Shirikos and Gobulu Dukis. Rashi Kule Kenane, Rashi Kuta Kelene. Juarigua minor, Ranshin to Trubayana, Ramone Trubayana, Tausa to Trubayana, Kuda Kelly and Chua de Runguma Resigara. Kuda Kelly Chua Ranshi Chabach, Kuda Kelly Choayana, and Ranshin to Rigmare, Kuda Kengi Chabach and Ranshin to Truba de Runguma Resora. Jurten Jurgumare, or Ranshi Chabach and Chidapunera. Ranshin to Truba de Lake, Kuda Kengi Chaba Tegmare. Chidabuna Roaju. Rangshin Tani Chumi than Shalato, Rangshin Trubaina, Rangune Trubaina, Rawatu Trubaina, Shalato in Del Kugumare. Couldn't kill a Tokumare Soto Asora. Rangshin Tani Chumi than Shalato Mavaye. She some be Shenas or Tipo to Chiguna. Yeah.
So then there's like sort of a doubt or a qualm raised here. It says then, from the viewpoint of the Prasangika Madhyamaka system, the two Buddhist schools asserting external existence, and it's kind of clarified here in the English for us, but that being the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika school, and the Chittamatra school would not be proponents of dependent arising. For both the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika assert an external reality produced from virtuous and non-virtuous causes that are truly established and capable of bearing analysis. So sorry, that will continue, but here when it comes to then this question that is being raised, well, according to, and there are four Buddhist tenet schools, we have those that are considered to be essentialists, and so of our four Buddhist tenet schools, those being the Vaibhashikas, the Sautrantikas, the Chittamatra, and the Madhyamaka, the essentialists who propound some kind of external existence are those of the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika. But those who are essentialists in the sense of asserting some kind of existence from its own side or intrinsic existence also includes the Chittamatra school, because although they're not asserting some kind of external existence that has intrinsic or inherent existence, they would say that the mind it is truly existent. There is no external reality, but everything exists in the nature of mind, and that everything is therefore existent from its own side, as is explained here, that for the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika, they are asserting an external reality produced from virtuous and non-virtuous causes that are truly established and capable of bearing analysis. And so from their point of view, all of our happiness, all of our suffering and so forth is existent by a kind of intrinsic nature, is existent from its own side. And those are truly established, like virtue and non-virtue are truly established and are something that is capable of bearing analysis, which here means that if you are to search for the thing designated within the basis of designation, search for what is that non-virtue, you're able to point to something, find something that has that kind of intrinsic existence. Or according to the Chittamatra school, again, they assert a truly established foundation consciousness in alaya vijnana, capable of withstanding analysis and serving as the basis for retaining karmic predispositions. So here, these essentialist schools assert some kind of intrinsic existence. Here, for them, that is the way in which you're able to have functionality and so forth. Whereas for the Prasangika Madhyamakas, composite things are not inherently or truly established, and therefore such a presentation of dependent arising of cause and effect would be untenable. So to have some kind of establishment from its own side, intrinsic or autonomous establishment, is contradictory, they would assert, to causality, to things being dependent upon their various causes and conditions. And so as the source for that, then he quotes from the fundamental verses on the middle way by Nagarjuna, which says, "It makes no sense to say that intrinsic nature is produced from causes and conditions. If produced from causes and conditions, intrinsic nature would be a product. How could it be appropriate for intrinsic nature to be a product? For intrinsic nature is not created, nor does it depend on another." So here, to again assert some kind of an intrinsic nature as well as causality is contradictory, and Nagarjuna points out to us, because something that is dependent upon causes and conditions is sort of antithetical to something being an intrinsic nature, which is uncreated and not contingent upon others.
Oh yeah. Voilà. Oh, that. Mama to do tendu kelengre, Rawan to be kelengre, tende, Mawa teg marwas, Umatejo Lola Kozu tendre Mawa marwasana, Tatel Lanja Yora. A children de Mawa Namji, Nuchu, Kinjide, Kondo Shessen Bendole Sumbe, Kondo Shessen Banashe, Dole Soluja Bendole Sumbanamse, Tenjin Debar Joa, you are Mebala Soba Sumda, right. Nga yuwa mebala soba, tenji deba jo sume shechi nga shechi dewa. O tenji ti kelingi reese, ti sonza tenji mawa shagu reese gara. Shechi ben dole chunga yuwa mebe kenla soba tenji somda. Ane nga le chunga kelin shechi, yuwa mebala soba ra. Kelin shechi. Mawa yinbe wadi kelin tenji kelingi, labki yore kelingi reese. Tende mawa yin la, tende mawa re se gora. Tichu puna, tende mawa yin se ya.
So here then we sort of laid out the qualm that then can such Buddhist essentialists be proponents of dependent arising? So as a reply to that, it says, in general, as explained above, these Buddhist essentialists themselves claim to uphold the principle of dependent arising and accept that the world and its inhabitants arise from the 3 or 5 conditions, such as the lack of a divine creator's will. So here in general, although the Prasangika Manyamakas might take issue with this, the Buddhist essentialists asserting that they do accept dependent arising, they claim to accept dependent arising. They say that they are proponents of dependent arising. They accept these ideas that the world and its inhabitants arise from these 3 or 5 conditions, such as lacking a divine creator's will and so forth, there being sort of multiple impermanent causes. And so they would say that they are proponents of dependent arising and accept the kind of propositions asserted by the Buddha.
Oh yeah, tatende ina chitsonga bagandende song shasura. Tende teba yora, sanjel tebe, tenjin debar jonga sombe kone, sanje chum dendela mixe teba yora, tende teba sede. Oh, tina kanto songe chiba nam tanze chiwa tenjiba. Pinyi kela teba ye chawa malu chube ko. She song batarse. Oh, no mawa namje tenjin debar jonga, yimba, tenjin debar jonga. Yena chachi rungwe tindrup je ngobo yen go bar samnese. Ngobo mawa tsoge tindrup yende tenjin debar jonga yimbe chirse yora. Kyuta kyanla teni chonga yena ko rangune trube kyawa yen go grese, kyusen ko yore shara. Mawa namje tenjin debar jonga yena chachi rungwe tindrup je ngobo yen go bese. Yen go bar samne. Tende ni ngobo nam Tindru yinbe kyusen do sone takwe tartung shesa. Ngobo nam tindru rese, tindru yinde kyutan kyan la teni chi debar chunga yinbe chese. Kyujen la teni chi debar chunga te tembar truba yinba rangwane truba yuebe kyusen la tangi orese ora. Kyusen la songi orese, samgi orese ora. Kyusen do sone takwe tartung shesa, takta la longare. Kare se ngobo kanga te teni debar chunga re te sonza rangwane truba rese ora. Uma tenjo asene rangune truba jina takta la londora. Meba jina cheta londora. Oh, tinte konzo takta la longa res ora takwe tar. Takwe tar ne kare. Takwe tar jimbe. Shuma tembar chela sa tangzin de tente yimba de samlutane rangune truba res sambe samlute temru tangi ore se konzo. Right. Ta keba umaba namjene, tenjin debar junga yinbe kyusen tinyi, ngobo na rangune mebe kyusen li yakshushil pa samgiwara. Umay bagirwa. Keba umaba namjene su, umay tenjua tabane, tenjin debar junga yinbe kyusen nyeje, ngobo na rangune teme yinko las, rangune trube mebe teme yinko ures, titrubgiwara se. Tedana Yangobo, Temper Mebata, Rangshinke, Mebala, Chachi, Roya, Johnny by Omatenjuage, Rangune Manaya, Tenjin Rebanjo, some Chawa, that Chebat Jo to Gres or then a talk with some Chachi Shatu Gres. I send down Roma Tozoge, Koratsen and Yechi man, and you look at Tawatamina, Chawa Rongumares, Chawa Chinga, the Rangune Kores Sigora. Oh, Timbe. Keba Omaba Namji, Keba Omaba Namlane, Tenju Tenye, Tenju Tenye, Tenze, Sawa Chang, number Tobe, Tawadam Chebe, Korjuba Sosos, Tandakar Sungursana, Roma Tozuka Tension, Debarjua in Betusangi, Ramune True, Temba True, Chechakota Longuaresa. Uma Tenju Atabu de Tension, Debarjua in Betusangi, Ramune Me, Ranshingi Me, Tandaba Matru, Checha. Nelu Tadu Trube, Kusel Kugiora. Oh, Tesonzako. Tenju Achane Tendeti, Kusendu Chenerwa, number Tobe, Trawa Maluba Chube Korjuse, Namdo Nyumubata Shije Tribala Soba, Mave, Kole and Rotugiore, Sigora. Mama Tozu Tati Hakotugiamato, Tendi in Bechusenji Ramune Truba Kelen, Dr. Londes, Uma Tenju attended Mares. Chesanta Tunda Karshavs Namawake, Tendre Sagachi or the Tendre, Dr. Lone Ramune Trube to sell to yours. Tenju Achane Ramune Mebe to sell to yours. All this Sudwa. Yeah, this Juna.
So here, then regarding these assertions, however, Tsongkhapa states in his praise of dependent arising, and here again, Jelama Tsongkhapa is praising the Buddha, giving a special kind of praise because due to his teaching of dependent arising. And so the verse here says, the immature who hold on to this strengthen the bonds of extremism. For the wise, this very thing is the way to cut the net of elaborations. So for the essentialists, the dependently arisen nature of composite things entails that they are truly established in order to be able to perform functions. So thus they uphold dependent arising as the reason composite things are truly established. So here for an essentialist, then they are putting forth the fact that things are causally are composite, are dependently arisen as the reason establishing that they are truly established. So for them, this kind of misunderstanding causes them to fall into an extreme of permanence. So again, for the Prasangika Madhyamakas, if you are grasping at things as having that kind of true establishment, you're sort of exaggerating or adding on to something. And for them, it's actually the sort of opposite. So according to Tsongkhapa, in so arguing, they strengthen the bonds of the extreme of permanence, those who would assert that dependent arising is the reason that things are truly established. And so therefore, they're just getting more and more strongly attached to this extreme of permanence. In contrast, the wise Madhyamakas argue that because of being dependently arisen, composite things must not be truly existent and must not exist from their own side. So they contend that although composite things do not truly or inherently exist, they are nevertheless able to perform all functions. So therefore, Tsongkhapa states that for the Madhyamakas, the dependent arising becomes the way to cut the entire net of conceptuality rooted in the apprehension of true existence. So here, then again, it is the case that those who are essentialists, although they are relying upon this idea of dependent origination, they're using it in the way that actually causes them to hold, to sort of strengthen their views of extremes, to become more entrenched in this idea of permanence. And this is because they are using, again, this idea that things, because they are dependently originated, therefore they are then truly established. And so they're not again, getting at the actual true nature of things, but rather they're sort of stuck in this misunderstanding. And so for those Prasangika Madhyamakas, but for Madhyamakas in particular, they're this kind of dependent arising actually negates their being established from their own side or being truly established. So there's a sort of opposite kind of understanding here for those that are essentialists, that are using this reason of dependent arising in order to assert that things have some sort of true existence. It's actually working to strengthen their kinds of wrong grasping at this extreme of permanence.
Oh yeah. Tena randing mawa namne sigara. Tenjin debaran jowa mawe. Tenjin debaran jowa mawe. Sanje be lamla tension do asat. Ngo mawa do dibada chitra mawa rasim jambate zo sigara. Tezo sanje chumden degi chinju rese. Sanje chumden degi shunglia tension do nangba yinchi nangba shung to zul tension do ya. Tanda ko ngobu tendu kelen ba yin tende sung tende imbe kyuze ji temba truba yin si kelen ga de mari bare sung gora. Tena ngo ma namne tenjin de bar jo ma sanje be lamla tension do namba sanje be trupdal shu shin do ro shu shin do ya ngobu na tendu ji ngo ni mebe uma tenju atabu ngobu tendu ji ngo yo mare rangwene truba yo mare side konju choba chugora. Katingo namrashile meba chesu tachina teta inango bune kyuji meba kera chane kyudan kin kanga meba chagres. Rangu mena meres. Tokbe takwa sambi yobe kochigu marese. O tende cheje uma tenjua. Chu tamje rangshinji madruba. Tende rangu ne madruba mawa tele choba chugore. Rangu ne madruna madruba rese. Ina kora nangba re nangba sanje be trupdali tengi warde. Tanda yango tende imbe kyusanji ngobu rangu ne yoku rangu ne mena meba rese. Soba chugyo resa, ati mandibwa resa wara. Ngo nye meba mawa namla tsueche, ngobo nam rangi ngoyo trube, tindrub deche lomba de, ngobo sama tindrub yin. Rwa, tindre ko nga jeche ni lomgwe wa resa. Ten lomba de neba yinbe ese, o tindre neba yinbe, trubdal neba yinbe. Den namne, che ngozare, Cheshin mebe nesu nekare nesu sungbe umabatana o tadi mandiba rese mera tanku esirese yamchambu rese sanje chumden de trupdal tingi ware sanje chumden de tenjin debar jo yimbe chusengi tongba ni ne luti ko tregi ware kora tenjin debar jo yimbe chusengi rangu ne yose lapki ware o di mandire ti mebe ne rese Mo charse yamchen rese tadi mandibule se tanda mebe neso sungbe se uma batar nas uma tenjo tana randingo mawa teda kya chawe tenjin debar jwa chishin mawa mayin se ko bandra se gora chita tende mawa yin yina chawe tende rangwene tenjin debar jwa yibe rangwene tongba jo shengenge o tende de sha tuguyo mate sonda tende mawa yina ya chawe tende mawa mayin se labkuyo bandra se gore ki inde chetsonga be trange le shenyin bule longtang ngobo na takbar debe chiriba namse ngobo takbar debe chiriba tezolia sanje gelame khele ge mar koran chu trubdare tenje debar jowa yena ro temba truba yengure rangwene truba yengure se o tene ngobo kanga temba truba da rangwene truba khele bade koran tembe Ongbada trubdare be ti khele bali yamse ke yo marese ta namba sanje ba yin shendo Tode bada chitama wata semjamba tezo sanje ke lamla tension do tade angobu tindru yese khele ade mebe ne re songora rangi tembe lo yimbe charwe ne mila se kyujela tene teshe joye tende khela ne temba truban devane che shege ke ne so so o konzo kyujela tene tembe tende khele tanda rangone truba yese khele bate Kemo shoya ke ne rese. Chirubazo koranzo lo re te lamna ke yamsaya ke yo ma rese. Kezo namba sanje ba tembe chinju ina tanda tende lamna. maybe not is yeah. I don't want to yeah.
So, thus, while Buddhist essentialists rely on the Buddhist path that propounds dependent arising, they in turn critique the Madhyamikas, who assert that composite things lack a truly established essence. And they stand firm in their proud assertion that composite things are truly established and exist by way of their own essence. So, here, for those that are proponents that are proponents of that are essentialists, that would say that things, in order for composite phenomena to function, they need to be truly existent. They critique the Madhyamikas by saying that, well, if the composite things lack this kind of truly established essence, then they would be totally non-existent. If something is merely dependently designated, for them that it does not suffice for existence. But in turn, the Madhyamikas, for this reason, according to the Madhyamikas, then, so the Madhyamikas are critiquing these essentialists by saying that you cannot simultaneously assert some kind of true existence as well as causality, as this dependent arising. Those are contradictory. But for the essentialists, in turn, say, well, your assertion that mere designated existence, something being merely designated, dependently designated, that does not suffice for existence. So, but in turn, for this reason, these essentialists are sort of proud and firm in their proud assertion that composite things are truly established and exist by way of their own essence. So they are proponents of dependent arising in that sense. But for this reason, according to Madhyamikas, Buddhist essentialists do not precisely understand or competently propound subtle dependent arising. So one could say that they understand generally, and they consider themselves to be proponents of dependent arising, but they don't fully understand or propound what we would term subtle dependent arising. So Tsongkhapa says in his Essence of Eloquence of Good Explanations, distinguishing the provisional from the definitive, it is not at all surprising that non-Buddhists who assert that composite things are permanent do not accept dependent arising and therefore assert that phenomena are truly established. This is their teacher's position. So it's not so incredible that non-Buddhists assert that things are permanent, or that they have these kinds of assertions that counteract or are contradictory to the Buddhist assertions. However, it is absurd to accept, on the one hand, dependent arising, wherein things arise and are produced in dependence on causes and conditions, and on the other hand, to uphold that phenomena are truly established. So here it's really like absurd, or it's kind of a laughable position to say that things are produced upon independence on causes and conditions and simultaneously have some kind of true establishment. So here again, for those who are non-Buddhists, that their teachers assert some kind of permanence, it's not okay, they can assert that, that's what their teachers believe. But for Buddhists, like these essentialists, to say that they do propound dependent arising, but yet are trying to hold to some kind of true establishment, this, Tsongkhapa points out, is kind of an absurd position, or is a laughable position.
Oh yeah, that is also. Oh, that are in the Karsura. Sravasti, Ra, Chutra, the Karsura. Chutra, any Kerabuchada. Kishi tene Jamdula da Shaya Kindiba number Tama Daridi Sanche Yabushib Narashe Kukabra Deba Sambuchon son Chida Kona to Tama Pay Abuchingere Nandi Shadus and Rere She and Godele Chusher Mambushe Desatosi Gorgidwa Yakona to Kanga Namjini Lopsa Yavuna Kanga Pay Abuchingere Kembushanda Suwe Ra Kenushanda Suwe. Daina Kodian Sange Shanda Savadin Bambu Jiresam, Tesu Nambichu Coagra, 데데 식도 삼자 하고 했던다 팽기리 삼정 고대가 좀 겁주래 추셔가 주래 시작돼 봐 되게 만부 거지 시다만 로마서 다이나 고 제마야 소부탄들을 주나 마티체체 뭐도 추셔디 시다 먹어선 마셔전 등샤나 요버차도를 삼게 어제들에 달걸소래 솔루장벤 도로바 솔루장벤 도라데 단달로에 주마소데 티 단다르미시 마트리샤트 또슬로 케바사무소에 솔루장벤 도데 체마 좀 사스는 마야 부체체 차르신데 셰쇼고 삼데 참마 토치 야부센시나 가라라 셰 고갑토 소나 마부사소 참마 체수이라요 라소 토치
So here our time is up for today, and right now this is the last class for right now. So I would just like to say thank you to everyone there listening at Sravasti, all of the nuns and the Sangha, Kin, Rinpoche, Geshe Damdul, and so forth. This has been a very fortunate opportunity to be able to give teachings on this Rice Seedling Sutra and have all of you listen and so forth. And so during these teachings, I gave a little bit of a longer kind of introduction for you who are there at the nunnery at Sravasti. Maybe you already are very familiar with all of this material, but I took the time for those who are listening who might be newer to Buddhism to give kind of longer introductions. And so it's kind of taken me a while to get through this. But so I would just like to say that we didn't get to, although we did not get to get through much of the text, I hope that if I have the capacity in the future, we can continue to give teachings on this Rice Seedling Sutra, maybe with a little bit less at the beginning, and we would be able to get through it a little bit faster. But I would just like to reflect upon what a wonderful, auspicious kind of opportunity to be able to, even though we didn't get through much of the Rice Seedling Sutra itself, to be able to have these kinds of teachings. I myself, it's a very fortunate opportunity to be able to explain these teachings and for you all to listen and to listen so attentively. And so I would just like to say thank you to all of you. And hopefully in the future, if we have all of the conditions, we will continue these teachings on the Rice Seedling Sutra. So thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Generous Rinpoche, on behalf of everybody at the Abbey, everybody online, thank you so much for these teachings. It's wonderful that you did long motivations at the beginning. I think it's always good for us to hear the teachings repeatedly. And please, please continue to teach this text. It's so valuable. It's really helping us in understanding emptiness and dependent arising and how they fit together. So please continue with this. And also know that we'll be attending the teachings that you're giving to Jewel Heart on the Vajra Cutter Sutra. So we'll be attending those, even though you won't see us on the screen, we're there. So please live long, continue to teach us and guide us. And yeah, may we be worthy students to receive these kinds of teachings.
아니, tukjenang shuya yores, tukjenang shuya yores. 아니, 저기 ngunro drawo di ngansola yang pendo champo chungsa, 저기 ngunro des. 아니, gyopo tsargo mare, hine mutune kuchi di mutune sukcha nangrona. Da koka junan te misibe kawasang bores. 아니 다 콘소 라양 다 키랑기 숭제 도제제베 도기 콜라 생기레스 아니 딜라 투체나 아니 마움파 양샬디 무투네 지에 응안소갈라 레와이스 아니 야 기린보 슈로나스
And Katrina, we really want to thank you too. Without you, none of this could happen. You really make the connection. So, you know, you learned Tibetan. It you know, took a long time, much effort to do, but it's really paying off in terms of the benefit that it gives to so many other people. So thank you.
This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of wholesome teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig, may you stay until samsara ends.
Puchin maumba the yankel jayagi revoyus. So thank you all. I see all of you Dharma friends as very important. So please remember that.